Okay, welcome. Those of you who are coming in right now, whether you're on YouTube, StreamYard Live, or if you're watching this later, welcome. I'm excited for this. I know some of you guys that are live had to wait a few minutes because I want to make sure we were right, just ready to go. Because I'm going to pull back the curtains here, as I promised. I'm going to talk about how do we actually do what we do. Yeah, because the one thing, whether you've followed us before or you haven't followed us, if you haven't known us for a while, I mean, I've been in this space for many years doing this. This is something that's worked for literally hundreds of people to the point where it became a system. And so I want to pull back the curtains and let you know what this system is, because this is a common question we're getting asked recently. I think many people want to know, what's this blueprint? What is it really about? Well, that's what we're going to dive into. So anybody that's on here, just so you know, I get your comments and questions roughly about probably about 30 seconds to 60 seconds later. So be sure to just say hi, tell us where you're from. I'd love to know who's here so I can make sure I'm talking to you, since I can't see you. This is not Zoom, this is StreamYard. Therefore, I want to make sure I can talk to you guys. I am going to leave questions open at the end. So be sure that if you got the burning questions, write them down, save them for the end, because I will be going through these questions and answering them for you. So let's just get rock and rolling. Oh, that's got a cool feature. You can see how this thing will show up on the screen. All right, that's awesome. Well, oops. Oh, shoot. I almost lost this. So let's talk about the work optional blueprint, right? Again, this is the blueprint we've used for literally hundreds and hundreds of our clients. And I mean, literally into the hundreds that we've done this for, probably even pushing 1,000. But I've perfected this system as the years go on. We just keep getting better at this to the point where becomes very duplicatable, very routine. Funny, I had a guy that told me, he said, I've been talking to you and other people in your company recently, and I just got to say, you guys make it sound like it's so easy to do, like it's so almost nonchalant. And the reason is because it is for us, because we do it day in and day out. It's something that we just do over and over. And I know I take it for granted. And so I want to kind of, again, share that with you more to see what that's really like. Because here's the truth. I mean, imagine if you have a life where your investments are working hard so that you can relax and spend more time with your family and loved ones and doing the things that you love. 100% clarity on what you're going to be doing with your money, especially amidst this whole uncertainty of the world that's going on right now. And you're no longer just hoping that your financial plan works in decades from now, but knowing it will, ultimately becoming truly work optional in years, not decades, which is why we just released the new book, the Work Optional Blueprint just came out on Amazon this last week, where we talk about this more in depth. But again, I'm going to give you guys more of a sneak peek and even a little bit more, because I even had some people say in the book, like, man, I wish you gave more of the stories of the how to. That's what I'm going to do in this right now. And so again, this is where people can become work optional in years, not just decades, including yourself. Most of our clients find at least 20,000 in just the first year loan. That's on the low end. Usually it's well higher than that for many of our clients. So I'm going to show you exactly just how it's done. Now, if you don't know my story, and if you haven't read the book, you're going to hear the story again. But this obviously was inspired by what I learned as a financial advisor. I had started, oh, and I see that there's a blueprint right there. So if you guys want to find on Amazon, there it is, the work optional blueprint right there. But my story began, I used to be a financial advisor about 24 years ago now. And I taught that for 4 years. I drank the Kool-Aid. I believe that if you set it and forget it, you compound your interest for 5 billion years. And if you just live cheap and sacrifice now, eventually in your 60s, you'll be able to retire free too. And I was even hoping that by my 40s, I might be able to do it. If I'm just cheap enough, I turn off that heat in the wintertime, turn off the AC in the summertime, and I'm just nickel and dime everything, have my tiny little house payment of $700 a month. Can you believe that? Those were the days. And so I had those kind of really, disciplined, just penny pinching saving habits that I learned from my dad, who you see in this photo right here. Now, at 4 years in, my dad actually reached out to me. He says, well, Chris, when are you going to reach out to me? When are you going to actually work with me and be my financial advisor? So I sat down with my dad and I looked at his finances for the first time in my entire life, because he was always very guarded about it. And as I look at his numbers, I see that he's 100% debt free. He paid off his house. He paid off everything. There's no debt at all. He was also stuffing money in his 401k. Had been doing that for many years too. So this guy was like the model, poster child for all financial advisors, Dave Ramsey, you name it. And yet when I looked at it all and I said, all right, basic calculate, even though he's single, and just give him at least a comfortable middle-class lifestyle like he's had. I said, Dad, here's the deal. Even though you've been pitching your pennies for so long, the deal is this: if you want to retire right now at 61 years old, you're going to run out of money in about 5 or 6 years, which means you're going to have to hope you die of a heart attack by then. okay, Chris, that's not exactly what I hoped you would help me to do here. Like, so how do I retire? I don't want to die in 5 years. And I said, well, I don't know, work longer, save more, which is pretty much the answer that if you're at this age, you've probably been given this answer by other financial advisors too. And this bothered me so much that I was seeking for answers. And finally, I found it. A friend of mine and I were talking, and he point blank just called me out. He says, "Well, Chris, how many of your clients are financially free where they don't worry about money?" I said, "Well, even the retired ones worry about money." He says, "Okay, so none. Got it. How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these investments like you've been recommending?" And as I was really honest, I said, "Well, none, because there's guys working here since the 1970s. This is in 2005, 2006. And he's like, well, there's your problem. And so I started to find another path. I found alternative investments, things that I was never taught as a financial advisor, things that no one had taught me that I didn't even know existed. But they've been around, and millions of people have been doing it, especially in the real estate space. And I started to do those things instead. I quit being a financial advisor because I couldn't do something that I didn't believe in anymore, that I knew wasn't working. So I quit being a financial advisor, and I started learning these things. And eventually, by the middle of 2006 of that year, I had enough passive income where I was able to retire myself. I was work optional, where I had enough passive income coming in that I could work because I wanted to, not because I have to. And that is exactly what I'm here to share today. Is that sorry, the images didn't convert well into this format. But cash flow creates more options in your life. When you have more money coming in than what's going out, you have that extra cash here. It creates more options. And those options are what creates real freedom. It's not about just having a lot of money in the bank or in a retirement account. It's about what income is coming in above and beyond what you have to pay for. There is where you find financial freedom. So the question I have for you is either you can stay comfortable or you can get free, but you can't do both, right? You stay in the same old, doing the same thing that advisors have taught for many decades, yet still hasn't worked, because now really only about 2% of people that have money in retirement accounts have enough where they feel free. They might have enough that by the math, they might say, oh, I can eke out a living, especially with Social Security, but they're not truly financially free. And those 2% stats, by the way, comes from Fidelity directly. So here's the problem, right? We've got all these issues going on in life. We know we've been told the 4% rule, retire at 65, you have debt, you have to save more, plus you deal with all the things of life. We got challenges of inflation that is not going down anytime soon. We've got issues with also, tariffs and the tariff war literally going on this week. We've got the national debt that's been run up like crazy, which is also devaluing our dollar, further driving up inflation and making our dollar worth less compared to other countries. Plus, we got these retirement plans, the government saying, hey, what do we need to get some more money from if we're going to pay off all these debts? Oh, I get it. Well, we'll just raid people's IRAs and 401ks and maybe at some point tax the Roths. And then, of course, we got Buffett that's been the last 2 years liquidating his portfolio, selling off Bank of America and Apple, the very thing that people saying buy more of, he's selling more of. He's even just recently, he's got like 347 billion sitting in cash. And even when he bought a company, which was more in the energy sector, in the oil and gas space, he didn't even buy it with his own cash. He used life insurance companies to do it. So very things we talk about, right? So anyways, he's of course getting more strategic. And then even Vanguard says that stock market's so high right now that the next 10 years, they only predict an average of 2.8 to 4.8%. That means that literally you could probably have your money in a CD, have less risk, and make about the same amount of money as people in the stock market right now. This is the problem. And then we got people telling you, well, just be cheap, live a cheaper life, just minimize your lifestyle to the point where you spend almost nothing. Then you can be financially free. Is that how you wanted to picture your life, to minimize your life versus try to maximize that time, to be able to have freedom, to be able to do the things you want with those that you want, right? Be able to spend more time with your family and do those things. That's not really being addressed. And by the way, even when you get these gurus out there, they don't even do math right. Dave Ramsey talked about saving $100 a year for 40 years. Or $100 a month for 40 years at 12%. He's like, oh, you're gonna have almost 1.2 million. Wrong. I did the math. It's simple math, buddy. And you're off by 200,000 bucks. And then you got people that follow his advice. They're like, hey, I've been doing this since I was 18. I'm now 50, lost all my money. Now what, Dave? Hey, I followed your advice and it didn't work. This is just the problem, right? And so obviously, like if somebody's trying to create passive income, I put the QR code up now. I'll put it up later as well. But if you're like, how do I know how much passive income is possible in my specific situation? There's a QR code you can actually scan right now. Again, I apologize that all this is wonky here because, I don't know why it converts like that. It looks great on my end, just not on yours, but you get the gist, right? There's the work optional calculator that actually I've created to show you what's possible with the monies that you have in your current situation. So speaking of using technology and AI, that's literally using automations to create a pretty accurate number for your situation. All right. We also have the 401k reality, right? Like I show this all the time. Like even with the match, what we find out is because the funds are so bad inside of these target date funds that they tell you to go into, because they perform so much worse than the stock market, you have to have the match to just barely make what you would make if you invested outside of it, right? And I mentioned, about Fidelity. I got to update that stat. It's actually now it just hit 1 million people have 1 million plus in the Fidelity accounts out of about 45 million account holders. Still about 2%, right? Now it's just over 2%. That's at the all-time market high where we haven't lost money for the last 16 years, really. By the way, the Transamerica poll that's there, those people, 35% of those same people said it would take a miracle to be able to retire, because they're realizing, like many of our clients, and we'll talk about here when I pull back curtain and what we do, we get clients that sometimes will have a couple $1,000,000 and they'll say, wait a minute, based on, if I want to retire in my 60s, it's a 3% rule, not 4%. It's a 3% rule that they've recalculated now. Well, that means at $2 million, I can only live on 60,000 a year or 5,000 bucks a month. And then because I put it into IRAs and 401ks, I get taxed on that 5,000 a month. Now I'm a multimillionaire that needs government assistance with Social Security to be able to have even just a halfway decent middle-class lifestyle, assuming you have a family, right? Again, I know single people can say, hey, 5,000 a month's more than enough. Great, awesome. Most people we talk to, they usually want at least 10,000 a month, okay? So stop playing this stupid game, because this is the blueprint that they'll never show you, because one, they don't know about it, because they don't know how to do it themselves, because financial advisors are just the blind leading the blind. It's not going to work. This is the blueprint to really truly become work optional. We have enough passive income coming in to work because you want to, not because you have to. All right, so let's dive in, right? Here's the 5 phases. I know depending on the size of your screen, if you're on your phone, well, sorry, you got to have like super, eagle eyes to be able to read this. But these are the 5 phases we take people through. And just so you're aware, if you can't read this, also at moneyripples.com, there's a work optional blueprint section that literally has these 5 phases spelled out. But I'm going to break these up, right? Because 1 through 5, this is what we take every client through. This is literally our process. This is what we do. All right. Everything from, starting rate, and the whole reason is to do these 3 things, right? Is get lean, get liquid, and get out. So get lean means, first and foremost, we want to plug any cash flow leaks. Make sure we're not overpaying on taxes. Make sure we got debt under control, or at least manageable to where payments are low compared to the balances, things like that. Or if we do have some that are higher payments compared to the balances, we pay them off. So we try to do things to improve your cash flow without even investing first. Then we try to get your money liquid. We try to make sure it's not locked up in prison. It's not locked up in equity of like, your home equity, for example, where you can only get that money if you ask for permission from the bank, who might tell you no. I know, because firsthand, I learned that during the last recession. This is also applies to 401ks, IRAs. Literally, I've had people come to us. They said, hey, I did your calculator, but I think I did it wrong because I put my current company's 401k, but I just realized I can't access that money, can I? So I shouldn't put that number in there. I was like, no, that's why we say old 401ks or IRAs, right? From previous companies that, haven't rolled over to a new plan. Because if you're in a current company, you can't touch your 401k unless you're at least about 60 years old or older. Then you might be able to do what's called in-service distributions. But for the most part, most people can't get to their money. So it's locked up in prison. And so we try to find out ways of how do we get that money out? How do we get that money in your possession, in your control, versus stuck? Because 401ks, just so you know, are in the government's name. You're just the benefactor. You do not own a 401k legally. That's why basically the IRS owns it, which is why they're able to make all the rules and change the rules whenever they want. So remember that, that's why you can't get to it without doing stupid loans and things like that. So anyways, long story short, we want to have that money liquid so then you can get that money out to create passive income now versus later. This is how literally we have people be able to create financial independence within the next 5 to 10 years. Some are able to do it within a year. Others might take 10 plus years. It just varies. But so let me just show you how these 5 phases work out. So phase 1 is we lay the financial foundation, right? For financial freedom. We try to get that foundation set, because what we want to know is, where are you at? Because just like any GPS that you have, right? If you're doing your Google Maps, right? Yes, you want to have a destination on there, but you got to know where the point A is, where your starting point is, so you can find the fastest, most efficient route to get there. That's what we do when you lay this foundation. We got to figure out what's the fastest route to get you there. And so what we're looking at, we start looking at things like this. We do a cash recovery audit. This is where we literally analyze your income and expenses, right? So anybody that hires us in the Work Optional Blueprint, this is what we're doing. We have them fill out a spreadsheet. We're looking at monthly income and expenses, and we start analyzing those. Now, I'll tell you this, for the most part, many of our clients don't even need not much in the way of money leaks. They're usually doing pretty well. There are some that definitely say, there probably are some ways we're overpaying taxes, or maybe we're not tracking our money as much as we could be, because we've had enough money coming in, so we haven't worried about it. But we get a lot of people that sometimes this is where the only part they're anal about is tracking their expenses, because they were like Dave Ramsey poster children, right? They were like doing everything by the book, budgeting and everything like that. And so here we might find some stuff, we might not find a lot, but we're looking there first. But we're also designing your freedom strategy. So yes, we can get the expenses under control, without sacrificing lifestyle, without living on rice and beans, but figuring out how we can do that. Then we design your freedom strategy, which is great. What's the money you have? What's basically the numbers that were put into that calculator that now we could do something with? And so we're trying to identify that and really lay the groundwork. And we do that in the first meeting. Often people have 3 to 4 meetings with a one-on-one coach. In that first meeting, that's the first place we dive right into is let's get into those numbers. Let's see what the cash flow situation is like. Let's see what assets you have. What do you have as debt and things like that? Can we restructure and do some things there? Are you overpaying in taxes, or could you be taken advantage of more because maybe you have a side hustle that you're not taking advantage of, that you're overpaying 5, 10,000 plus a year in taxes, right? So we're trying to look for all these things to really help improve cash flow from day one. Like, what's that low hanging fruit? Plus, even if somebody's like, we got it dialed in, we're doing this perfect. Well, the nice thing is we kind of move into phase 2 during our first meeting often, which is, and I talk about this too, is how do we get liquid, right? Where do the monies come from? We're looking at things like in your portfolio, your assets, right? We're looking at your bank savings accounts. Do you have bank savings just lying around getting killed by inflation right now? And just so you're aware, what the government tells you is inflation rate is not the inflation rate. That's a much more tempered down rate. So they have to increase your Social Security that much every year, right? So they don't go bankrupt so quickly. So they've toyed with that rate so much that they've watered it down when it's actually much higher. And you know this to be true because you see real life. You know what it's like. When they say, "Oh, it's only 3.5% this year," you're like, "Bull! It feels like 10." And the truth is, you're probably closer to the truth than they are. And so you're losing the inflation on bank savings. A lot of people get these life insurance policies that have cash value. We also talk about that and we offer that too. But often they don't know what to do with them or even how to use them in a way that's more efficient. Or if they're wasting money on that, that could be a money leak too that could be addressed. Mutual funds. You have money sitting in mutual funds that right now are at all-time highs. You might be thinking, man, the bubble's about to pop. Do I need to get this money away from here? Same thing with old or 401ks and IRAs. People are really worried right now that they're going to lose the money that's bubbled inside their plans, right? It's been too hot for too long. And at some point, there's got to be a reckoning. Rental properties. We get people say, "Oh yeah, I do real estate." But then we look at rentals and say, well, could we do better? Maybe there's equity we could be taking advantage of that can make it used. We could use it for better purposes. Same thing with your own home equity. Are there things we could do there? How about gold, silver, or crypto? Especially because all those have had a nice run up over the last year or two. Could we be capitalizing on that? Could we be using that to generate some passive income as well, right? So we look at all those places. And then we move to phase 2, where we start to figure out, okay, now we found the liquid cash, right? Now, how do we find the right investments for you? And so we look at like what the wealthy are investing in, right? Many of the wealthy use hedge funds or other managers or family offices where they invest in these very things we talk about. But the good news is we actually get access to deals that are more private, a little bit more close by the book, so it's not like you're dealing with these big institutions where you're not sure what's going on behind the scenes. Here, right? So you know what's going on with your money. These investments also fit your freedom plan and they're done with you when we do the due diligence. It's not just you doing it by yourself. We walk side by side with you as we coach you through that, right? So the nice thing is we never get paid from the investments you do. We don't raise money. We don't offer investments where you would be like, "Oh yeah, sure, Chris. You just want us to buy into your investment." We do not offer any investments. But in our network, we do have roughly 20 plus operators that have a variety of different investments and different things. And we'll talk about which places those are, but a variety of different investments that you get to choose from. And as a result, what it does is it allows you some more options, things that you just never get from a financial advisor. But again, the good news is we get to help you narrow it down, and because you just hire us when you work with us versus us working for those people and we get paid commissions and things like that, like financial advisors do, we don't do that. So we just work for you. You can come back and say, hey, I'm kind of wondering about what's going on with these investments. What do you think about this? Or I kind of have this concern. Like, is this a real concern or is this just in my head? By the way, can I talk to other investors that are in this deal too? Yes, you can, right? We got a whole community of investors that do that too, right? So kind of fun. One of the big questions we ask our clients up front is, do you want more income right now or do you want growth? In fact, just to check in, make sure you guys aren't falling asleep, type that in right now. Like, if you had your choice right now, do you want more income coming in today? Or are you thinking, no, I don't really need the income right now. I'm actually okay working for several more years, but I want my money to grow so that eventually I'll take income down the road. Which one would you fit into? So those of you who are live, just type in income or growth. I would just be curious to see which you tend to fall, which camp you tend to fall into. And yes, we occasionally do get some people say, can I have both? And the answer is yes, you can have both. You can have a mixture of the two, of course. But if you had a priority, would it be income or growth? I'd be kind of curious to see. And they're two very different paths. And this is the one thing is that there's groups out there that are like big mastermind groups, right? Because some people say, well, we offer alternative investments and we got these, and we'll just let you have access to our whole list, right? But there's no real direction. It's just, hey, have at it. Here's your buffet. You have no clue which ones have MSGs in them or what's going to kill you or poison you, or which ones are just going to give you an indigestion afterwards. But hey, go for it. Eat whatever you want. And that's what happens in most groups. And what's nice is because depending on how you answer this question of income versus growth, it narrows down the options. Because again, we have all these operators. We want to narrow it down and say, great. Now for you, there may be like 4, 5, 6 options that would be the best fit. And it can make it a lot simpler when you're trying to look at this versus just saying, all right, maybe I'll just get one of everything. And you don't know if it's going to work. By the way, I've literally seen people in groups like that delay their financial freedom by years because they're trying to do that. Right. So that's the thing. I just warn you that many people will delay it for years because of this. Okay. So we got kind of a split vote. We got, one coming in for income. We got some coming in for growth. And then we got one for both, but more income, right? Which, by the way, you're not alone. Many people will say that as well. I have one client that he had $8 million and he said, honestly, I want income. Well, at first he said, I don't care. I just need growth. But when he started investing, he wanted more income, right? Growth, I love it. You can have both. So, or you can definitely have growth for sure. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And depending on where your money is, you might not have as many options anyways. Like for example, what if you have a 401k? Could you be moving that into a self-directed IRA where it would be just growing versus paying you income now? Although there are some options that maybe do both, right? So that's the choice you have to make. All right, now you have to get that money out. So like I said, now I apologize. I moved these images over and realized I probably should have made it white font. But here's the thing, guys. I'm not a designer. I'm a money guy, okay? So I make my money from money. So to help you see this, you can see the images. So the first one on the left, the house, turnkey rentals. This one hasn't been as popular lately because interest rates are higher. But turnkey rentals are much like what I mentioned before, is where I can actually go and buy a property, but somebody else manages the property for me. This frees up my time. This frees up my ability to have to like go and deal with the tenants, the toilets, and the trash. And it means I can literally buy a home anywhere in the country. Because, for example, I live in the state of Utah, and almost anywhere in the western half of the United States, rentals are a horrible, horrible idea. Bad, bad, bad idea. But if I go out east, there's rentals that actually are cheaper, but still get better rent. And so what if I have a property manager take care of it that's there, allowing me to free up my time? And then they only bug me if there's something major going on, where they have to ask for my permission on something. I'll say this is not fully passive where you just have to set it and forget it. You can never think about money like that again, where you can just put your money away, never think about it again. That's the easiest way to lose money. Anytime you do anything like that in any other aspect of life, you just set and forget it. Imagine if you did that with your health. Imagine you just said, you know what? I'm not going to think about my health. I'm going to worry about it. Forget those colonoscopies. Forget all, that's a fun one, right? Forget about all those kind of things. I'm just going to ignore it. And I'll just hope that it works out. Is that really a safe way to go? Of course not, right? You got to use your brain a little bit. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be consumed by it, right? But it does mean that, of course, we're going to be actively thinking and maneuvering and strategizing a little bit. And so does this mean it's a daily job? Not at all. But what it does mean is that, yeah, you might have to get involved. So like turnkey properties, which I would call semi-passive, there are times that you might end up getting involved. lending or notes. This has been more popular recently because some of the best opportunities have been you being the bank where you lend your money to an investor for a property or for a group of properties, whether it's into a fund or whether it's into the individual deal. Now, specifically with lending or notes, you can be the bank. Just like if you have a mortgage on your house, you know that you're partners with the bank, don't you? Now, what happens if you don't make that monthly payment to the bank? They can eventually foreclose on you. They could take the property away from you. By the way, this is another reason why I don't like having lots of equity in my property. If you have lots of equity and something happens where you can't make that payment, if you have a lot of equity in that property, are they more likely to want to foreclose or less likely? If you have a lot of equity, they're more incentivized to foreclose on you because then they can not just take your property and get their money back, but now they get all the profits from the equity inside of it too. You can do the same thing. You can be a lender to other real estate investors that might be short term. It may be 6 to 12 months max. They're borrowing your money. Maybe they're doing a fix and renovation of the property to then flip it for a higher price and make profits. And that's why they wanted to lend money and get access to money very quickly versus waiting for a bank to give them that loan that could take a month or two to get approved. And so you have opportunities to make double-digit returns by lending your money. And if they don't pay you, you take the property and it's yours. And ideally would have equity in it as well if you did it right. Again, we have connections to help you do that. Funds, I mentioned funds. You can do a debt fund, for example, where maybe it's not just one property, maybe they have hundreds of properties in there. You can put your money in and get paid a contractual return. So they might pay. Now, some of them might pay you on gains, while other ones might pay you at just a set rate of return. For example, we have one that pays anywhere from 10 to 12% a year, depending on how much you invest and for how long. I mean, it might be 6 months or it might be 3 years that you keep that money there, right? And you can even reinvest it over and over again too. So there's things you can do that way. There's apartment buildings. That's the one on the far right you can't really read. Apartment buildings, right? If obviously it's probably really tough for you to put enough money down for you to own an apartment building by yourself. But what if you pull your money with other investors? This is called a syndication, where you pull your money with other investors and then you get to have ownership in that property. So you get to split those shares depending on how much money you've put in compared to everybody else. So there's things like that you can do and get all the gains plus some tax benefits that come with that too. Same thing with self-storage. I mean, one of the things that happens is when you move into, and most of the time when you move into recessions, I'm trying to say that appropriately there, when you go into recessions, lots of people will downsize and use self-storage units. That could be a place where, again, you're not dealing with tenants at all. I mean, they have tenants, but they're not living there. Ideally, maybe there's some weird wacko that is, but they got their junk there, right? And that's what Americans do. When they don't want to know what to do with their junk, they put it into a self-storage unit. Could you make money during those times? There's also mineral rights. That's what that little drop is. Mineral rights means like oil and gas. Literally, if gas prices are starting to go up, hey, did you know there's ways to profit on that? That you can actually get paid from the amount of minerals that they pull out of the ground. And of course, the one with the handshake is partnerships. Can you do a partnership that actually allows you to be able to really like get, be in some sort of deal together? Like, for example, I have raw land partnership where I have these guys going and buying and selling raw land using my cash. I'm the financer. I'm a 70% partner. They're 30% doing all the work. And the great thing is that now I've had over $500,000 that we've not just put in, but reinvested over the last 4 years. That's now kicking off over $12,500 per month on that partnership, right? By the way, that $500,000's bought us over $1 million worth of land. So that's kind of cool too. So those are the kind of things that you can be doing, right? So that's kind of what we're doing in that phase is figuring out what are your options? What are the best ones? Now, some of them might sound great to you, but they may not be a good option depending if you picked income or growth, right? For example, lending is a great income option, but not so much on the growth side. But maybe a turnkey property or apartment building could be great on the growth side. Or same thing with partnerships, or even the partnership I have with the raw land, it's kind of a good growth opportunity for about 5 years to then eventually start pulling out the cash flow to do that. Same thing with mineral rights. Great one that could be good for, it may not pay a lot of cash up front, but after a few years, the cash flow starts to really roll in as that business partnership starts to grow. So there's a lot of things that happen, especially as you do that. All right, so phase 3, right? We started to research all these. And by the way, depending on where you are, it might take longer or shorter. I've had some people take, some people might jump in right away because they've already done deals like this and they jump in the first month. They do like four investments in the first month. And then we've had other people that said, I've never done this before. I might need a few months to research this. So their phase two might take a little while, especially as they're working with a coach to kind of really hash out these ideas and feel more confident. But once you start to take action, that's when the real results happen. That's when the cash flow and the passive income start to happen too. So you start to take action on that plan. That has to happen, right? This is where we actually start to see the numbers work, versus being theory. We actually try to encourage people to get through this as quickly as possible. Phase four, while you're starting to build up this cash flow, you're starting to get those investments going, you're waiting for some of the cash flow to roll in. Some cash flow will come in within a month or two, while others might take a quarter, like 3 months or so, and then others might take a year. So it just depends on what investments you're in. But in the meantime, we want to start protecting your assets, because why would you build up all this wealth to then lose it all in one event? What if there's a death in the family, or you, for instance, right? We don't like to think about it, but that could happen. What do we do to protect your family in that case? How about health issues? We have a lot of people who are like saying, I can't quit my job because I'll lose my health benefits. And then I show them, hey, by the way, you can actually do these kind of health plans over here that is almost the same cost as you were getting from your company who was actually paying for some of your premiums. So there's a lot of options that are around those kind of things. So how do we protect that? How do we protect you in case of disability? How do we protect you in case of lawsuits? That's another one. Or taxes, over taxation. How do we protect it that way? Or how do we make sure that you're bulletproof? So even if somebody tries to sue you, it doesn't affect any of your family or personal finances, things like that. Those are the things we address to make sure that you have just a strong enough defense to allow your offense to work harder. This is where even like life insurance, right? With the infinite banking and things we do, which becomes an offense and a defense at the same time, because we can use that money to also invest. And of course, I just said what is there, right? We cover the life's what ifs, basically, right? And then phase five, which is the fun one, but it's also the most frustrating for some people, which is multiplying your passive income. This is when you start to double down on what's working. So you might be testing. You might say, I'm going to try this. I'm kind of scared, but I'm going to try this investment here. I'm going to try these investments here. You might try a few investments, but as you start to gain some confidence, you might say, you know what? I've still got more cash to invest. I'm going to put a little bit more over here. I'm going to do some here. And we do talk about how much should go where and with whom. Well, how much is too much? I had to warn one guy not to put too much in mineral rights because he was getting so excited by the potential and the opportunity. I said, hey, you want to keep that under 25%. We don't want to put too much in that area. Well, they put about 50+% in that area, and about to the tune of about $1.5 million. And of course, when oil prices came down, they noticed that their income was affected by several thousand a month. Where I would have said, hey, let's get into some other things that have more locked in type of returns so that you also get consistency too. So there's things that we help you do on that front. Again, I'm not trying to nerd out, but I promised you, I'm pulling back the curtain here. So I'm pretty much telling you what most of our clients do in about a 4 to 6 month period of time. I'm teaching you in a matter of like 10, 15, 20 minutes. So anyways, that's where we start looking at new opportunities. This is why people will keep us going on retainer, because they know that in 6 months, things can change in the market, right? So for example, last 3 years, apartment buildings have been, I've kind of just said, let's stay away from those for right now, right? There's a lot of stress. Now, in the last 3 years, we've seen apartment buildings drop 20, 30% in value. So I'm glad that we did that. But now we're getting to a point where that's just about to turn a corner. So it's very possible in 6 months, we might say, hey, maybe a little less lending, maybe a little more in the apartment space, right? We might say, you know what, right now, we might want to look at this option instead. Or maybe we want to start looking at rentals again, because they haven't been looking good the last few years, but now they're looking good again. Or maybe this kind of rental is good. So those kind of things. Plus we do market updates and things like that to keep people on track. So anyways, let me get to the examples, what some of our clients have done. And then I'm, again, going to open up for questions for you guys. So here's a client number one here, 59 years old, wife's 55. Their goal is 15 to 20,000 per month. What's interesting, he told me, he's like, Chris, I've got $3 million of net worth. Yet, all I'm making is $300 a month from his rental properties. He has 2 rental properties. He's like, I'm making $300 a month. I've got 3 million net worth. And when I asked this Vanguard financial advisor, what can I retire, or what does it take for me to retire? I don't get a clear answer. And I had to tell him and his wife, I said, well, the reason being is because, well, one, either the advisor doesn't really know themselves, or two, they're afraid to tell you, because the reality is, if you want, let's just say 200,000 a year, which is in between, it's about 16, almost 17,000 a month, right? So if you want 200,000 a year, if you're trying to live on 3% in your early 60s, which would be the recommended amount that they would say, That means you got to have about 33 times 200,000, which means you got to have about $7 million saved up. And he's like, well, I've got 1.9 million. Plus they do have another retirement account with like 600,000 in it that his wife has. I said, yeah. So you basically got to triple your money between now and whenever you're trying to retire. He said, man, at that rate, I'm gonna have to work till I'm 70. He's like, I could work until I'm 70. I just don't want to have to do it. I want to have the options to not do it in case I want to have some time freedom now versus waiting. And isn't that kind of what we all want, right? It's not that we want to all stop working. Some of us might, but I know for me, I've been financially free twice, right? Because the first time I did it, the recession hit me and I went over $1 million in debt and had to dig out of that hole again to then do it again by December 2016, where I hit that 10,000 a month plus of passive income that next time. But the thing is, like, I don't ever picture myself just not doing anything. But wouldn't it be nice that you can do it on your own terms? And that's basically what he was asking for. He's like, yeah, I might want to work, but I just don't want to have to work. He's like, I don't want to have to work till I'm 70. I said, well, based on the plan you have, and especially if the market drops, like I predict it probably will very, very soon, you might have to work till at least 70 before you could have that kind of lifestyle. That's why the Vanguard guy is not telling you, that you can how to retire or what it takes to retire, because it would be scary considering you are way above the average person, right? You are in the top, really the 1 or 2% of savers right now. And so that, I think that kind of shocked them, right? That they don't have to triple their money. When I said, no, you don't have to, because watch this, guys. Based on this situation, here's what we're able to do now. Now, of course, it depends on whether they take action on, but this is what the plan is. First and foremost, they have those retirement accounts, a lot of them. Should we move some of that into self-directed IRAs? Which again, self-directed IRA just means that you get to choose where to invest it. All those options I mentioned, almost all of them work inside of a self-directed IRA. A few of them you probably wouldn't do because you lose some tax benefits or the possible extra taxation. But you can literally roll your money over into a self-directed IRA and then you choose where you invest it. It doesn't have to be in the stock market. It can actually be in any of these kind of deals and grow your money. So for those of you that say growth, if you have retirement accounts, this could be a way to grow your money before you take the cash out. Of course, guess what? The second thing there is just cash out some retirement. Yeah, we're probably going to be looking at ways to do that while minimizing taxes. So we may not try to pull out all $2 million and then get this massive tax bill, but maybe we start pulling out chunks of it. Maybe we can convert some to a Roth, although that would delay it. So we probably won't do that with this specific situation. But we can start pulling some of that money out and then investing that money for cash flow. The good news is we don't even have to pull that money out. We can just literally leave it in an IRA because he's now 59 and a half years old. He can access it, just has to pay taxes on it. So we can invest in these different places. Places like lending funds, more the funds that we would do that invest here. Some of the things that could be diversified, like in the oil and gas space for sure, would be money there. Some of the other money he might have in savings, that's where we might do some things like try to diversify a little bit using things like the business partnerships and things like that. Car wash businesses are kind of not working right now. Or, well, they're working, but I would say they probably wouldn't work here in the near future just because I think a recession is coming. But there might be other types of businesses that would work that you could be investing in too. So anyways, that's a big one. The other one too is his rentals. Remember, had 800,000 of equity. Yeah, he was only cash flowing 300 a month. And so that's one thing that we're looking at now is like, well, could we redirect it? Yes, we could move that into other rentals, but right now we might just cash that out and then use that money to then go fund into business partnerships which actually there's some tax advantages there anyways to minimize some tax burden. And we can even do some other investments as well that are growth, that give it a little extra growth orientation, but also some income too. So that's kind of what we're doing with him. This other client, they're actually in their early 40s. They first reached out to me in 2020. I got introduced by a mutual friend of ours, and he works as an employee. I mean, high paid employee, of course. His goal, him and his wife, they want 15,000 per month. Now, as we're going through it, they went and did that work optional calculator that I showed you, right? And they had about little over 1.1 million in just savings, everything from savings accounts, life insurance, which was one of the policies we set up for them. They also had money sitting in like mutual funds and brokerage accounts, things like that are not in retirement accounts per se. And of course, they still have 600,000 in retirement accounts. Now, the retirement accounts for them, because they're in their 40s, they can't just pull that money out, because if you do, you get 10% penalty in taxes. So can we move that into a self-directed IRA instead? Use that money to invest in other places that could be more growth oriented, much like, whether it's funds that we just compound the interest, and some of them are paying 12%. So compounding almost makes it like a 14% return for them. And then we've got, again, things that really don't have tax advantages. So, lending is another option you can do inside of those too. Now, for the other savings, that's where we can start doing some more things where we can actually have, things like the syndications that we could put our money into to grow that money and grow that cash. More, more funds in the sense of like doing debt funds and whatnot that pay a certain return to give them that cash flow. Great thing is that, like I said, I just told you what I was doing, but even that 1 million invested, even though there's 1.1, we'll leave about 100,000 or so out for emergencies. 1 million invested at 10% is 100,000 a year, plus the money that's in their retirement account, so we can keep growing with a little bit more certainty than maybe we get with the stock market, right? So now they're able to earn 100,000 plus. Now, here's what's cool. Oh, that didn't translate well. Oh, well, I'll read it to you anyways if you can't see it. But here's how that works is for their situation, not counting the money that's growing in the retirement accounts, just looking at the cash. If they want to retire early before they're 59 and a half, before they're 60, even if we don't cash out the retirement account, look what we do their cash. Year one, that says $100,000. So like I said here, that first year, 10%. And again, there's some that will pay more, but I go on the lower end of 10%. 1 million invested, 10% is 100,000 a year. Well, they're also saving about $20,000 a year. So they're saving 20,000 plus they make another 100,000 that first year alone. By the way, it was crazy when they said, "Do you think it's worth us hiring you?" I said, "You're going to make a sick amount more per year than you're ever going to pay us. That's a no-brainer." Okay, that's not a problem. I even told them, "I was like, listen, even if you just invest 300,000 of this money, you'll make about double what you pay us. All right, so you're okay." But the 100,000 plus the 20,000 they're saving, that's 120,000. Well, that's 120,000 at 10%, is 12,000 more a year. Year two, 112,000. Next year, because now we're compounding the income, that fifth phase, right? Next year, we're at 125,000, 140. Eventually, by year seven, they're well over their 15,000 a month goal at 188,000. Just so you're aware, guys, 15,000 a month, 180,000 a year in traditional planning. If you want to do that in your 40s, you're only supposed to pull out maybe 2.5%. So say it's 2% a year that you're trying to pull out to live on about 180,000. Guys, that's a ridiculous amount of money, right? I think you gotta have about $3.5 million saved up. They would again have to, in their case, have to triple their money to possibly have that much income. We're here, we're just using the money that's already there. That's what that compounding income has an effect. Here's another client, early 50s. This one was kind of fun because they had 5 million sitting in different stocks, like with Google, Meta, things like, Facebook, things like that. Well, we looked at it and we said, well, let's analyze your cash flow first. So even though they came to us just to look to see where they want to invest their money, we looked at first and foremost and said, well, look at this cash flow. We can actually restructure some of your loans, refinance within your house, free up $3,800 a month. That's about 45 grand a year, guys. On top of that, they also had some side businesses they were using, but they weren't taking advantage of the tax advantage they had. So we're actually able to save them over $30,000 a year, meeting with one of our CPAs in our network. So already between the 3,800 a month or 45,000 a year, plus the 30,000, without investing a dime, freed up about 75,000 a year. So remember, it's not just about hitting your passive income numbers. How can we even lower the expenses without cutting back your lifestyle and then also create passive income, right? It's like having your cake and eating it too. We also saw a rental that they had was making zero cash flow, but had 200,000 of equity in there. So we're able to improve that by 2,000 a month by reinvesting that elsewhere. So now we're up near $100,000 of improved cash flow. Then we can now look at the $5 million they had sitting in stocks to then create some money from that. And so this other one too, I didn't want to just show that, these people all have millions. I thought it was interesting that lately we've had a lot of people that do have that because the market's been just going crazy right now. So there's been people that were in the hundreds of thousands now are into the millions with their money. Well, I'll tell you about a client that he had only $250,000 of cash, right? He had about $250,000 in his mutual funds. He was wondering, he was in his late 40s at the time. This was 6 years ago. He was wondering, he's like, well, what do I do with this $250,000? And at that time, this is what I talk about, like things do shift and change. At that time, rentals not only paid great cash flow of like at least 10 or 12% a year, what they call cash on cash return based on your down payment and the returns you get, but they also had tax advantages where you get to keep that money virtually almost tax free. and there's appreciation, which there's a multiplier effect of the appreciation. And there's deep, like I said, additional tax advantages too, right? So, I mean, between the appreciation, the cash flow, and the fact that the renters pay down your mortgage for you too, so it builds equity even if there's not appreciation. His 250,000 bottom six rentals, which cash flow him about 30,000 a year. Already, that's amazing. What's cool though, 6 years later, it's now at 40,000 a year because those rents did increase, even though they flattened lately. They did increase to about now over 40,000 a year. It's actually getting closer to 45,000 a year right now. But what's cool is that his quarter million now has over 650,000 of equity in these properties. And now he's thinking, okay, maybe I need to sell some of these properties, reinvest this in other places, so then we can push that up to his goal of 50,000 a year. So his goal is just if I can get to 50,000 a year, that would be amazing. I mean, 50,000 a year from a quarter million is ridiculous. Traditional retirement planning, financial advisor would say if you were living on 3% of that quarter million, that would be $7,500 a year. That's like $600 a month. And now we're getting him to the point where he's about to hit over $4,000 a month, probably in the next year or so. Not bad for 6 or 7 years of doing investments. I've had other people too that had hundreds of thousands of dollars that we were able to invest different ways. Now, this one woman, she was a single woman that she had about $600,000. She split it between, she did buy some rentals. She also invested in some apartment deals, and she bought some oil and mineral rights too, to where that started paying her some income. And she actually got to the point where, and actually she did some lending too. So she did some lending. So again, we diversify. That's one thing we do is we try to split it up. So you don't have all your eggs in one basket. And at the end of it, she had about 6,000 a month, which was her goal. So her 650,000 became $6,000 a month after a couple of years. Again, results may vary and yada, yada, all the disclaimers that go with that, right? But that's the thing that we just do habitually all the time that we see. But I know that most Americans have never, ever seen this. Because again, financial advisors don't get paid to tell you about these kind of investments. They can't offer them. Legally, they can't offer them because they have a license to sell you very specific things, usually mutual funds, insurances, and annuities. And that's pretty much 95+% of financial planners out there today. But the others, they don't do this stuff because again, they don't get paid to do that. This is what it means to become work optional. If you have questions, for those of you live, I know those of you that are also actually on, like watching this later, type in the questions in the comments. We'll answer them later. But those of you on live, I want to give you a special preferential treatment. If there's questions you have, type them in now just because it takes a minute to show up on my end, right? So I want to make sure I respond to the questions you have, reward you for being here. I have about 5 minutes for those questions. So I'll just wrap this up while you're typing those questions in, is that this is the whole goal. Get your money to work harder for you without having to gamble and just hope that it works out. This is the plan. It's very much a hope and pray strategy that everybody has with financial planning. They hope that the market goes up. They hope that it's going to be enough. They hope that inflation isn't too much and that they're not just like a Dalmatian chasing a fire truck, but never getting there, right? You want to make sure that there's something that actually gives you hope. And the faster you do it, the less risks you have. This is not get rich quick at all. This is not it. Trust me, there are plenty of people out there trying to sell get rich quick stuff, and they are too good to be true. And I have friends that I know are going to lose a lot of money over the next few years because of it. This is not that. We like low risk, high returns. I like lower risk than stock market with higher returns than the stock market gets too. That's what I like to go for. And there's limited things that are there, which is why we have that kind of limited suite of options. Even though there's a lot of options, still way more limited than the possibilities that are out there in this space. When you take that matrix red pill, you'll realize that all these opportunities pop up and you're like, well, what about this? What about this? And we'll have to calm you down and say, hold on, that's risky. Oh, yeah, that ATM fund that, yes, you can make 26% a year on. Be aware you could lose everything in that deal, right? And those kind of things. So some of you guys have been around long enough to know exactly what I'm talking about. So we don't want to do that. Just so you know, those that actually do hire us, and you have to qualify. Again, that work option calculator, we do not take somebody on unless we know for a fact you're going to earn a lot more than what you pay us. Otherwise, you just don't, it just doesn't make sense for you to work together, and it wastes both of our time. And honestly, it just stresses me out because I want to make sure we keep our virtually almost 100% success rate with our clients, right? And I say almost because there's always the exception of somebody who doesn't do something, right? That happens about once every 5 years. We get that client that literally is shown the path and doesn't take it. But we get very good at figuring out who's willing to take action and do stuff versus those that don't. And so, yes, we even do stuff to help people get on the same page with their spouse, because that's a really hard thing to do sometimes, especially if you're your spouse doesn't listen to you. We also do state of the market briefings. In fact, literally in 5 minutes, I'm doing a state of the market briefing for our VIP clients with our work optional community, which is one of those things we do too. So people can actually ask each other questions and talk to each other. And we just had a live event here in Park City, Utah, that people got to meet each other and talk to each other and say, "Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy here." Right? We even have things about how to teach your kids how to learn this stuff. Investment deep dives into specific deals and even new ones that we have coming up now. And I already mentioned the mastermind too. So I'll tell you about, my dad, his situation. He did take that traditional plan. He did work into his 70s, and he's literally stretching out every dollar. He's now 81 years old, trying to make ends meet, right? Just trying to figure out how to make it all work. Again, the perfect saver. This guy would have made Dave Ramsey so proud. In fact, Dave Ramsey would have bragged about him on his show if it were like 15, 20 years ago. But today, and this is what I see happen so often, is that he's like, I've got to stretch every dollar because I've got nothing, right? He's like, I've got this home equity, but so what? I can't eat my house. What do I do? And that's the thing, is that we're trying to help stretch out his cash flow as much as we can. You've got to be careful not to fall into that trap. Don't be like my dad. Don't be the person that sacrifices his entire life only to find out it was for nothing. That literally he had to work until he couldn't work any longer. That should never be anybody's path. You have a much bigger life, a bigger mission that you're put on this planet for than just working hard, paying bills, and then dying. You can do so much more to create a massive ripple effect, which is why we call our company Money Ripples. So remember this, is that as Will Rogers says, even if you are on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. It requires you to take action. So again, scan the QR code. Questions, go ahead and put those in the side right here. And I'll answer probably about one question. I'll have that time about one question to do that. But yeah, go ahead and scan the QR code if you want to figure out what's actually possible in your situation right now. All right. I'm also going back to see if I missed some questions that came from earlier too. All right. If not questions, did anybody learn something that you might say, hey, that was an epiphany for me? If so, type that in as well. Oh, yes. I know some people are having a problem with the QR code. You can go ahead and just put that in right here. So there's the direct link. Moneyripples.com, passive income calculator is the link right there. Not slash link to the calculator. So passive dash income dash calculator, or if you go to moneyripples.com, you'll see it there too. All right. So I have one question here. It says, talk about 65,000 a year that have 70,000 in equity, 30,000 in savings, 30,000 in annuities, 20,000 in life insurance, and 15,000 ready to use for trading or, and then it goes ... So I'm guessing, based on the wording of this question here, talk about 65,000 plus a year that have 70,000 equity, 30,000 savings. Here's the thing, like if you've got 30,000 savings, and if that's assuming your emergency fund, we're not going to touch that. If you've got 30,000 in annuity, okay, that could be something that could be done with. 20,000 life insurance, maybe, depending how much you need for savings. 15,000 use. If you've only got like 30, 15,000, here's what I'm going to say is don't even worry about these strategies. Honestly, like the only people that are really ready for strategies like I'm talking about here, you should have at least, I'd say 100, 150,000 minimum to invest above and beyond your actual emergency fund. And your emergency fund should be at least 6 months of your expenses. So if you need, say, $10,000 a year to live on, or $10,000 a month to pay your bills, we should have at least 60,000 sitting on the side we never touch. Now we can do things to make more interest off of it, yes, than you would just sitting in the bank. But you shouldn't be worrying about investing until you get far above $100,000 in addition to your emergency fund. Now we might have something to start talking about. And that's a big problem. And I know even Warren Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, who just passed away recently, he says the same thing. Because do the math. Let's just say you have $25,000. I get people all the time say, I've got 25,000. Now what? Yes, you could do some of these investments. But one, you're all in on that one investment. Well, what if there's something that can go wrong? Because these are not risk-free. There's still risk associated to it. Well, 25,000, you put that money in and you make 10%, you make 2,500 a year. It's not much. You'd be better off focusing on how do I improve my cash flow, right? Which is what we talk about in our Wealth Accelerator Academy. That might be a better fit versus doing the one-on-one coaching. The Wealth Accelerator Academy talks about how do we find and free up the cash so then we have more to play with, more to invest with, right? So don't try to just do this because you want to make a lot of money because 10% a year is not going to make you rich on 10,000 bucks. $1,000 is not much. The best thing you can do is focus on making more money and improving your cash flow. Because if you had an extra, say 10,000 a year to save, that's way better than trying to grow your money at 1,000 or 2,000 a year at a time. That's just not as doable. So it's a slow game. It might feel like a long time, but if you focus on just how do I get to at least that first $100,000, and that you just hyper focus on that and improving your cash flow, living, at least moderately, within your means and things like that, you'll find out that once you get there, then you'll have more options. So actually, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up because I did not include that in here. All right, but for the rest of you, I would say this: if you've got cash or you wonder if you've got cash you'd be using, try the work optional calculator. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, reach out to us at moneyripples.com. Thanks.